Okay, so the idea of Thrive came about 3 or 4 months ago, and I was looking to create something that is accessible for everyone, that people can join in and come together as a group to learn and also to learn how to thrive, hence the name. And for me, it's a new way of healing, which a lot of people don't know about or they don't consider because it's about healing emotionally. A lot of people don't realize how important that is. And so, just a quick outline of what I'm going to be doing in the next half an hour or so. A little bit about me, not too much, don't want to take up too much time with me, but you'll hear more about that in the actual program. A little bit about emotions and hidden stress, why stress is often not obvious. We're going to look at some coping strategies and why they ultimately fail. And then finally, why and how emotional healing is so important with a very special offer right at the end. So do stay tuned. So, yeah, my story. Well, don't want to take up the whole of the presentation with that, but just to say, um, I had rather an unfortunate brush with kind of CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, sometimes also called ME. Although it wasn't diagnosed as that, it was called, at the time, I was diagnosed with anxiety or depression, and I was given lots and lots of different drugs in my early 30s. So when life should have been expanding and becoming really amazing, what happened instead was that I ended up in bed being nursed by my mum. I had to actually go home to live with my mum for a while because I couldn't cope. I couldn't walk, I couldn't dress myself or have a shower or feed myself or anything. Fatigue is absolutely awful, and it's if you've never had it, and you think it's just about being tired, it really isn't at all. Now, what I hadn't realised was that this was kind of the final straw, really, in my life story. It wasn't that I was perfectly well before then, although I thought I was. I'd actually been chronically stressed before this, but was completely unaware of it. I really didn't understand what stress was. I thought stress was just things that happened to you in your daily life. And I didn't realise that they can actually be unconscious and they can be from your past history as well. So I'd like to ask you guys a question. How are you? We ask that of each other a lot, don't we? How are you? And most of us say, oh, we're fine. I'm fine. But are you really fine? Or is it really something else? Maybe you're stressed and you know you're stressed. Maybe you're feeling a bit down or depressed. Maybe you're feeling anxious or flying off the handle for no apparent reason. I get a lot of people who find that is a really difficult symptom to deal with, particularly for their loved ones. Maybe you're suffering fatigue, pain, or unexplained symptoms. Now, these symptoms could have emotional roots, and this is the surprising fact that I have discovered through my journey and am now passionate about helping other people to discover that emotions are not just they're not just feelings. They have an energy vibration and indeed a neurohormonal signal, so they affect your nerves and your hormones that changes your biology and can create illness when chronically repressed or unbalanced, particularly if that's a long-term problem. And they're very linked to your stress response system. Your stress response system is a very complex interweaving of your nervous system and your hormonal system, and it actually is meant to get you out of very difficult situations. It's really only meant to be used acutely rather than chronically. Now, stress response is something we understand as maybe say you had to have a really difficult exam. You're having a driving test, for instance. That's a good example. We know that that's going to stress you, and that's normal. That's what I would call an acute stress. But there are other sorts of stresses which are more hidden, and a lot of them are not just what's happening in the current life, but they're stresses that have happened to you in the past that are from unprocessed or unresolved uh, emotions in your previous life. And so it's very interesting, isn't it, that these can trigger you in later life to create something that gives you symptoms unconsciously. And so it's not always the obvious stuff. And so often you only have the symptom and not the reason why. So you may not even know why you're feeling the way you are, why you've got the symptoms you have. You just get the symptoms and they seem very random, but actually they're not. And guess what? There's another reason it's really important. We often have imprints of chronic stress from early childhood, so before we have memory, before we have that conscious recollection. The age of 7 is when that starts to come online. We actually have emotional imprints of things that happen to us, or even, and this is startling and it's very new information, from the generations before us. So it can be, your parents' generation or your grandparents' generation. If they had stress in their lives, it actually changes the way you operate. And that's called transgenerational trauma. And it's something I come across a lot. And it turns out my father had a very difficult war experience. His brother was a POW, a prisoner of war. My mother was a twin who was separated from her twin sister when she was just born. And so, I got a double whammy really of transgenerational stress there. And that was part of my story, and I didn't even know. I didn't even know that that would affect me. And so, why stress is so often hidden then is that the events from our past, which were not safe to process, are stored as memory in the body. So, memory isn't just the memories that you can recollect, it's actually feeling senses in the body. And if your body didn't feel safe at some point, so if as a child you didn't feel heard or you didn't feel witnessed or supported, those memories are not able to be resolved. And this is what I mean by kind of unresolved emotions. And they're stored instead as a memory in the body. And we sometimes call this trauma or adverse childhood experience, or ACE for short. Now, we may not know about this. As I've said, we may realise that something's amiss because we've got symptoms, but we won't know why. And we have coping strategies from our past experience, which we've adopted to survive in the family that we grew up in. And those are in order to create an adaptation to stress, in order to help us survive, basically. And it becomes so habitual that we don't even know we're running these coping strategies. And actually, being stressed becomes normal, as it was for me. And so we don't even know we are stressed some of the time, maybe all of the time. And a lot of people don't. They don't understand that their physiology, the way their body operates, is actually in a stress state because it has become your normal way of being, your normal way of feeling. But of course, our bodies know they are responding to the environment and to the stress response, and they're responding accordingly. And now I've got a quick question for you. What type of stress coping strategy do you have? And I've created a poll which I won't be able to access until I stop screen sharing, but maybe we can have a look at that later. But there are 3 main types. There's the avoidant. That's sort of problem. What problem? I'm fine. Maybe if I ignore it, it'll go away. Or even, you're the one with the problem. We see that with a lot of narcissistic parenting or partnerships, a complete denial that they have any issues and in fact blaming other people. Well, there's another sort, and that's probably my sort of style, which was anxious. I need to sort this out. How? Who can help me? What do I need to do? I'll make a list. And then the anxiety creeps in. Why can't I sort this out? I've tried everything. I've been through, and I went from also, doctor to doctor, and asking all sorts of questions, and nobody could help me. And then there's a third option, which we call disorganized. And this is where it's all too much to handle. And instead of having any strategy at all, you just kind of go against that and decide you'll just have another snack or a drink or a smoke or a chat, maybe another box set. You've got lots of ways of distracting yourself from actually feeling anything. And so this is really key. Disorganized people have the worst health outcomes. And this isn't a conscious strategy, can I just say. These strategies come from your early attachment and your attachment styles, which I'll be going into a little bit on the course. And they're completely unconscious strategies, and once you form them, they tend to last for the rest of your life. And so they're all slightly disrupting your neurohormonal system. So they're creating problems for you without you being aware of it. So I'd love to know whether you're 1, 2, or 3. So make a mental note, guys, and when maybe I can set the poll up or get the result of that when I stop sharing. And so all this creates a toxic soup of conditions which affect your mind and your body. So this kind of dysregulation of your nervous system, it stops you actually healing your cells. It stops you sleeping well. It affects your digestion. It has so many physical effects. So emotions are not just in your mind, okay? They are in your body as well. And emotions actually are not all the same. They are actually signals, because they have kind of a resonance, and they send messages to your body's cells. Now, either they do that in a good way, if you're in, gratitude and love and joy, which probably you're not, hence you're here, or the opposite message is we're under threat. And in this diagram, you'll see there's sort of a cut-off point between what we call the expanded or positive emotions and the contracted or negative emotions. And so being under threat is a really big problem. So if your body perceives it's under threat, it's going to shut down your healing and create what's called the cell danger response, and that changes your energy levels, and it just affects everything about you, because energy is just necessary for every cellular process. So if we remember then that human beings are energetic, we're not just physical. We're not, although we tend to think of ourselves as a human body, remember we're a human being as well. And in the being, if you've ever witnessed anybody who's died, when the life force goes out of the body, the person has gone, the body remains. So we're not just bodies. We have an energy. We have, in fact, resonant frequencies. And emotions are complex, but they're part of the normal human expression. They're what makes us alive. So they're really important as signals. But we need to feel them in a safe environment to learn who we are. And this is really key, actually. It's really key to know that we're safe in our bodies in order to know who we are. I've seen we've got a question about the attachment styles. I might just go back, and there we go. Is it possible to have 2 or all 3 of the attachment styles? Really good question. Usually we have one that's dominant, okay? We usually have one that we tend to go to, but it can depend on who we're with. It can depend on the relationship that we're in. So for some of my experiences, I'm mostly an anxious person, but I have also in my life been avoidant if I'm with someone who's more anxious than me. And so I would say it's generally that you have one predominant style, but it can vary, and of course it's all on a scale. And so I'm really just asking you, what's your most common attachment style here? And so I was talking about safety, and how important it is to be in a safe environment. Now, safety is not the external sense of safety, like, you know, if I said to you, go outside, is it safe? You would make that assessment. But if I said to you, are you safe in your body? That's a very different thing. It's actually about feeling that who you are is okay, that who you are is enough, and that it's okay to be you, and it's okay to be here in this moment, and that life is basically benign and good. And a lot of people do not learn that. I did not learn that, and I didn't know that I hadn't got that understanding of myself until I met other people who did. And that was a real shock, that some people never even considered what bad things might happen. Whereas for me, it was always on my mind. What's the worst thing that's going to happen in this scenario? So I was constantly on alert, because my body never learnt to feel safe. And that's unfortunate, but it does happen, and it's really common. And it can be from a breach in attachment, difficulties with birth, or breastfeeding, or a mother who's emotionally detached, or difficulties in the parental relationship, all sorts of reasons for that. And so emotions are really key to healing, okay? But many of us leave it completely, or we avoid it entirely in our kind of journey towards becoming whole. Why is that? Many people think they're not important. And certainly if you'd have asked me, I'd have said, well, why are emotions important? Mine are fine. You know, I don't really have a worry about that. I never really considered that it was a problem. And in fact, modern medicine doesn't even consider it a problem. Psychiatry, which is the branch of medicine that is supposed to deal with mental health, misses it completely. Doesn't really deal with emotions. It deals with thoughts and cognitive thinking. Another reason we may avoid it is that we're afraid of our emotions. We're afraid in particular of being overwhelmed, which is very common. That we've got to a point where we're sort of coping, and we don't want to break down those coping strategies. And so we fear that if we look at this, that the whole Pandora's box will be opened. Some of us learned to keep going. That's kind of stiff upper lip mentality. You know, we're just going to keep going, don't look down, and everything will be all right. And of course that works for a while. It did for me. You know, it got me through my teenage years and my 20s. And it wasn't until I hit my mid-30s that kind of approach started to break down, because my systems got less resilient. You know, your energy in your cells starts to naturally reduce when you hit your 30s and 40s, and so that's why chronic illness can sometimes strike then. And then of course we're afraid of being made vulnerable. You know, apart from being overwhelmed, we're also afraid to reveal ourselves in case other people will humiliate or attack us. And I think that at the core of me was that I didn't want to be vulnerable, because I thought of that as a weakness, and I really did think of mental illness as a weakness, and I wasn't weak in my opinion. That was a huge error that I made there, that being vulnerable is not being weak, it's actually being open-hearted. But of course a lot of us, we're taught that being vulnerable is something to avoid. And if we were never shown how to express our emotions well, you know, how to process them even, by those close to us, by which I mean mum, dad or siblings, we never learn how. We never actually learn emotional resilience or emotional intelligence. And we end up bouncing around from one feeling to another without really engaging with it. And so that's why Thrive Live was born, really, because in my own experience, emotions are so key to healing. And that's why we need to understand what they are and how to process them. And processing emotions is not just a matter of feeling them, it's actually being witnessed in your processing. It's actually having someone who doesn't try to outdo you in your emotionality, who's there for you unconditionally, can hear what you're saying without trying to persuade you that you're not feeling them, or distract you, or, as I've said, compete with you. And this is a learnt experience. You know, how to deal with emotions. We're not born knowing how to deal with our emotions. If you witness a baby crying, or even a toddler, they get very upset very quickly, and they have to learn how to self-regulate, how to bring themselves down. And that is demonstrated usually by the way the way they're dealt with by people around them, by their caregivers. And a lot of us didn't get that kind of calm reassurance. I certainly didn't. And so we don't get that feeling of being okay, or knowing that our emotions are okay and that we can express them. So we got this rather poor message, bad teaching, as I've called it here. And this leads to this poor emotional literacy, and therefore low resilience, because resilience, if you think about it, is all about your emotions being responsive to your environment. And so, like anything, you need to be able to have flexibility in your emotional response in order to do well in life. So just killing your emotions, not having them, which is the avoidance style, is not particularly helpful, but neither is feeling all of them all the time, because that equally is a difficult one to function well with. And as I've said, you're likely to end up with these chronic conditions as well. So where the body is responding to this continual threat response. And so Thrive is my response to that. I want people to move from, a state of just getting by or coping to a state of thriving. And so I've created a 3-module course, and here's roughly what you're going to get with each module. So the first module is about the mind and the body connection and the stress effect. Seeing symptoms as messengers rather than as the problem itself, and the stress response, what it is, how it works, and how it interacts with your emotions. Module 2 looks at emotion and the changing brain. So how past emotional experience, which we've just looked at, changes the body and the mind to create these signals of hidden stress. And module 3 is heal the past, heal the present. So by changing these emotional expressions and the perceptions of what's going on, we actually retrain our nervous system, because our nervous system just adapted to what we had and isn't necessarily adapted to what we now are living. And so we need to retrain it to encourage healing, and that's really how we get beyond these emotional blocks, the ones that create these long-term hidden symptoms. And now you might ask the question, I hope you do, why thrive? Well, many people exist in a survival state, like I did. I was doing okay. As far as I was aware, I was functional. I had a job. I got up, I went to work, I came home, I had friends, I went out, I did all the things that people are supposed to do. And when I got ill, I remember thinking, why me? This is so unfair, because, I had worked so hard to get where I was, and, I was doing a professional job, and I thought life should be easy, and it wasn't. But I hadn't thought about the past. I hadn't even considered it as a function of what I was experiencing. All I had was these unexplained symptoms, which my doctors, and believe me, I asked many, many doctors, I had loads of tests, they defied explanation conventionally. They had no answer, really. So people are told to get on with it, like I was, or keep taking the tablets. That was actually, it's not just a quote there, it's actually what I was told by the last doctor I saw. Gave me, I think it was 9 months worth of painkillers. And he actually said, well, it'll probably get better on its own, but here you go, take these. So you have your symptoms, or you may have more subtle difficulties in life, especially in interpersonal relationships. All right, this is where we really show up our emotional literacy. And this was certainly the case for me. I sought relationships. I wanted to have good relationships, but when I tried, there would be all these assumptions that I couldn't understand. My emotional literacy of my own emotions was so low that I would often react in ways that even I couldn't understand. And of course, that creates huge difficulties. And then there's all the assumptions that you make about other people as well, that they should respond in the way you do. And so throughout all of this, nobody asks the question, what happened to you? They always ask what's wrong with you, but not what happened to you to create the you that you are. And nobody considers this other way of healing, that emotional healing is such a vital component. But great news is that we now have the tools to do this that previous generations, my mum and dad's generation, didn't have. And so, yeah, the you just got to get on with it was the only option they had. And so you, like me, can move to thrival. That's not a real word, but I've made it up. But it should be a real word. So whatever the state of your health now, you can change it, but you can only do that if you really engage the whole mind and body. And so this is why Thrive was born, and I've got a very special offer for you here. It starts Thursday the 31st of March at 4 p.m. It's going to be on Zoom because we want to record it. And it's going to be a 3-week, 3-module course. So that's a module a week, which will be live. This time only, we're going to have the live recording and discussion session after each presentation. So this is a very special offer. It'll never be run quite this way again. You can find out how you may have missed an essential part of healing, and you can join me for a very exclusive price. Now, the normal price for this is £129, but from today, £99 using a special coupon code, which is Thrive !Live 30. No gaps between those. And that's your special code for £30 off. Now, if you're watching the recording of this and you came to me from the Chrysalis Effect email, there is a different code, and please will you make sure you use the Chrysalis Effect code if you've come that way, because it's really important that I track where you've come from. And that code is also £30 off, and but just make sure that's Thrive !CE30, no gaps. And there is an extra special bonus for those who complete the course towards ongoing work with me, which will make this course effectively free. Now, I don't want to give that away yet, because obviously you'll discover that when you come onto the course, but it's just a very special bonus. And so my question to you is, can you afford to stay where you are? And can you afford not to make that commitment to your own healing? Because that's what this is. If you'd like to, you can join me. You can go to my website, which is alchemytherapies.co.uk. You can select booking, and you can find Thrive in the online courses section. Don't forget to use your code for the £30 off, whichever one you're choosing there. It's March the 31st at 4 p.m. and I'm going to show you how you can book actually. Here's a screenshot of the website. Once you've clicked book, which is up here, and selected online group courses, and you'll find Thrive there, book now, and then when you come through to the booking form, you'll see you can put your promo code in here, which is the coupon code, and that will give you £30 off. So that's what you do. Now, I don't know if anybody has any questions, because it looks like if I stop sharing, I immediately will end the live. So I've obviously failed to do this correctly. But if anybody does have any questions, I'm very happy to answer those in the chat once I've posted this. And it just remains for me to say thank you. And I hope you can join me and the group um, and see you there. All right, take care, everybody. And thanks, Carolyn, also for being my guru here, asking the questions for me, and to Justine as well for helping me set this up. This is a very new venture, and I'm so excited to take you on this journey. So take care, everybody. Bye for now.